As most of you may know, Disney is one of the biggest entertainment companies around the world, and have, over the years, through really evil practices, sanded down their goodwill with most of the people who have been paying attention. But to the average person, Disney is still just a company who makes children's movies, TV shows, and really anything that can shut your kid up for the next hour. Disney has and always will be a staple of children's entertainment, and with kids' movies, shows, and education comes working with animals. And as you're about to see, many of them have suffered by the hand of Disney in some of the worst ways imaginable. Disney as a company has been around since October 16th of 1923, in which brothers Walt and Roy Disney wanted to create a cartoon studio, quickly becoming successful as they were the first to ever create a sound cartoon, with Steamboat Willie in 1928, cementing themselves forever in history from that point on. After becoming successful by the 1940s, they moved into multiple different entertainment industries outside of just their cartoons, live-action films, television, theme parks, and wildlife documentaries. The wildlife documentaries began their production in 1948, with their first ever being called Seal Island, a true life adventure. This would be the title for all of their wildlife documentaries going forward. Seal Island was a short film lasting around 27 minutes about seals, showing their life cycle in Alaska. This won Disney an Oscar in 1949 and kicked off the series from there. Disney from this point would continue to make the True Life Adventure series until 1960, ending with Jungle Cat. They were mostly based around exotic animals and niches of nature you may not see in everyday life. These documentaries won Disney a lot of rewards and were viewed and honored as educational by the Professional Teacher Organization, PDK International, the National Education Association, and many others. This would be until 1982, when a documentary created by the Fifth Estate, titled Cruel Camera, exposed many of the flaws, the lies, the abuse, and the death toll these documentaries actually had. Two documentaries in particular are going to be the ones that we are talking about: Perry, A True Life Fantasy of 1957, and White Wilderness of 1958, both of which are part of the True Life Adventure series of documentaries. But Perry is a strange exception. Unlike the rest of the True Life Adventure series, Perry was based off of a book written by Felix Salten in 1938 as a spin-off from Bambi, which he also wrote. The original story within the book begins with a human child named Anna Lee saving Perry's mother from a marten. Perry then goes off to search for her mother, getting attacked by a crow, but being saved by her mother. The story is a sort of coming-of-age romance story about Perry and what she experiences as a squirrel. The film, however, was not drawn. It was fully live-action, like the rest of the True Life Adventure series. It was shot over the course of 3 years, using real squirrels and live animals to film every shot. When adapting this, they deliberately changed the story to add more entertainment value. Instead of Perry's mother being saved, she's killed, on screen, by a wild marten. Afterwards, moving into a tree with another squirrel, Poro, they fall in love. But a forest fire caused by a thunderstorm and the return of the marten, who killed Perry's mother, threatened both of their lives. Perry and Poro, Perry's mate, were both played by several squirrels throughout the film, along with most animals showcased within the film, as the film had a very extensive and revolving door of animals due to the high amount of deaths taking place on set. None of the shots within this film are faked. They are staged, but not fake. The production team would set things up deliberately in this film to get the squirrels killed, as they were deemed expendable. Squirrels, martens, weasels, and many other animals were killed in the process of the filming. Roy E. Disney, the nephew of Walt, would be the one to work on this film, He and his camera crew spent a lot of time waiting for nature to interact. Most of the shots within the movie are actually captured from various seasons of wildlife throughout the 3 years of shooting the film. But when nature didn't give them what they needed, they would have sets put in place, where they would capture both wild squirrels and predators to put them on the sets. And as a direct quote from Roy himself, see what they do.
Well, you just aren't going to go out into the woods and set up a camera and wait for the squirrel to come. So what you do is you create a set, in effect, in nature. You just sort of fence off a part of the forest. And you put some squirrels in there and whatever other animals they are to interact with, and see what they do. The easiest things to do were things like the marten chases, where the marten was the arch villain in the piece and chased squirrels all over the forest and ate a number of them.
Multiple accounts indicate that numerous squirrels died during the filming, often as a direct result of staged predator-prey encounters. The film's storyline required showing the perils a young squirrel faced. For example, Perry's father is killed defending the nest from a marten. A flying squirrel is caught by a goshawk, a rabbit is caught by a fox, and many more. These were deliberately set up simply to add drama to the film. Not only this, but during the film there are shots of many of the squirrels reenacting dangerous scenes, such as a squirrel taking a 20-foot drop from a tree to save itself from danger. The movie shows a prolonged shot of a real squirrel falling through the air for over 20 seconds. This shot is then followed up by a hard cut to a different squirrel being tossed into a pile of leaves on the ground to simulate a safe landing. At the time of release, these on-set animal deaths were not publicized. Despite all of this, the film was critically acclaimed, winning Disney the Golden Bear for Best Documentary in the 1958 Berlin Film Festival, despite not being a documentary. The deaths and ethics shown to make this film would not be discussed until 1982, when Cruel Camera interviewed multiple people who worked on the True Life Adventure series, including Roy Disney.
We had about 20 tame squirrels, and then we had quite a lot of wild ones, which were considered and were expendable.
So Perry was a composite. Perry was a number of different squirrels.
Perry was many, many different squirrels, yeah.
Are there some people who would say to you about a film like Perry the Squirrel that that's misrepresentation or that it's cruelty in some way?
The answer is yes to both questions, sure. It's easy to say that you're cheating on nature and what you're showing is not really the truth. The fact is that you put those two animals together and they're going to do what they're going to do.
Frankly, would you have talked to us like this, about this subject, 5 or 10 years ago? Was this something that
5 years ago, yes. 10 years ago, probably not.
This was something a decade ago that people in the business did?
There was a time when we were presenting a lot of footage that we knew was staged as having occurred naturally. And we were saying, we even had a disclaimer on those early True Life Adventures that said this occurred in nature exactly the way it did, and the hand of man didn't influence it. When we began to stage things, we kind of kept that disclaimer a little longer than we should have, and so we were in a position that we just couldn't talk about it.
This trend would unfortunately follow directly into the next True Life Adventure installment that Disney would go on to make, and this is probably the example of animal cruelty most people know when bringing up Disney: White Wilderness, the True Life Adventure documentary of 1958. White Wilderness is a nature documentary produced by Walt Disney as a part of the True Life Adventure series. It focuses on wildlife of the Arctic and subarctic, featuring animals such as polar bears, walruses, Arctic wolves, wolverines, caribou, and lemmings. The film was shot over the course of 3 years on location in Canada, with 9 cinematographers collecting footage for various segments. Major filming locations included parts of Manitoba and Alberta in Canada. Upon its release, White Wilderness was met with critical acclaim for its striking Technicolor cinematography and dramatic portrayal of nature's savage and cruel struggles. It even won the 1959 Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature, the third Disney film of the decade to do so. At the time, critics praised the film's breathtaking visuals and music, with the New York Times calling it a fine, often fascinating color documentary on animal wildlife in the North American Arctic. It was fully advertised as 100% a nature documentary, and most people believed it to be just that. Unfortunately, that is not what it is. The production relied on both wild-caught and captive animals, and in some cases outright set pieces, to achieve its footage. For example, lemmings, small tundra rodents, do not inhabit the specific area of Alberta where the part of the film was shot. There are about 20 different types of lemmings, but not in Alberta, Canada. And seeing as how they are one of the main pieces of wildlife in this documentary that they were trying to capture, this became a problem fairly quickly for the production team. On top of this, there was an ongoing myth about lemmings during this time period, due to us not fully understanding how lemmings work. Lemmings every 7 years will overpopulate, and because of this, some of the lemmings will try and migrate through bodies of water. What ends up happening because of this migration is that some of them end up dying in the water, being pulled off to cliffside shores. And because of this, the myth of lemmings committing mass suicide by jumping to their doom was born, and was ultimately pushed by Disney to be true in this documentary. This myth was showcased in the documentary, as it was one of the pieces of the lemmings' life cycles that Disney wanted to capture. This brings in the question, if it's a myth and lemmings don't actually do this, how exactly did Disney capture the footage of this event? Well, they staged it.
Bill, you worked on a film called White Wilderness, Disney film. Do you recall a scene involving lemmings in that?
Yes.
Did you shoot that?
No. There were about 3 cameramen working on that. So what did you hear about the lemmings?
Can you recreate the scene for us? Do you remember?
I know it
the
was
sequence
taken. It was a recreated thing done in Canmore in Alberta.
You say recreated, how?
Well, they built a set. It looked like the Arctic, and had a nice painted sky for a background, and bought their lemmings up in Churchill. And the Eskimo kids run around, caught them at 25 cents a piece, and shipped them all to Canmore. And they made a little thing like a turntable and ran the lemmings around and filmed the lemming migration to the sea.
Now the scene showed dozens, hundreds of lemmings.
It's the same lemmings over and over again.
Falling into a body of water, purportedly the Arctic Ocean.
Yeah, that was the Bow River.
The Arctic Sea.
That was the Bow River.
It's not given to man to understand all of nature's mysteries, but as nearly as he can surmise, it would appear that the lemmings consider this body of water just another lake. And if it's a lake, then it must have a farther shore, and so they strike out boldly. But gradually strength wanes, determination ebbs away, and soon the Arctic Sea is dotted with tiny bobbing bodies.
The water in which those tiny bodies bobbed flows under the ice behind me. Not the ice of the Arctic Sea, but the ice of the Bow River, which runs through downtown Calgary, about 1,100 miles south of the Arctic Circle. And those lemmings didn't jump in, they were pushed or thrown, because it appears that Walt Disney's version of the life of a lemming is about as far from the truth as the Bow River is from the Arctic.
According to a 1983 investigation by Canadian Broadcasting Corporation producer Brian Val, the lemming scenes were faked. The lemmings, supposedly committing mass suicide by leaping into the ocean, were actually thrown off a cliff by the Disney filmmakers. The epic lemming migration was staged, using careful editing, tight camera angles, and a few dozen lemmings running on snow-covered Lazy Susan-style turntables. Disney did not want to wait for the 7 years to try and catch the act naturally, nor did they try and disprove the myth. They simply wanted the clips for their documentary, no matter how immoral it was to do so. On top of this, the lemmings used within the filming are not ones to migrate. They even got the wrong species. This wasn't all with this documentary, however, as bad as a mass industrial killing of animals is for the sake of getting clips for a documentary. The way that Disney got the lemmings is another story. As said previously, the lemmings shown are not ones to migrate. On top of this, the lemmings utilized within the documentary are not from Alberta, Canada, where the documentary was shot. These lemmings were brought and shipped from Manitoba. Disney paid Inuit children 25 cents per lemming that they caught and sold to them to be shipped to Alberta, putting both the lemmings and the children in danger, simply to kill them off later on screen. During this infamous scene of the lemming deaths, it's been reported that if the animals didn't fall off the cliff from the producers scaring them, the producers would resort to pushing and throwing them off instead. The lemmings were not the only animals put in danger through a staging of events for this, as most scenes for this film were faked, including the filming of a polar bear falling off a cliff. Disney claimed that they had no idea that this is what was going on, and have since vaulted and disavowed this film entirely. But this would not be the case until 1982, when Cruel Camera exposed the film for what it was. And I'm gonna be honest here, I have a very hard time believing them, considering Roy Disney's statements within the documentary.
We were talking about Roy Disney, Walt's nephew, worked his way through the Disney organization, eventually running the Wildlife Film Division. Do you recall the Disney film called White Wilderness?
Yes. I didn't work on that film, but I was kind of around when it was being made.
Do you remember the lemming sequence?
Yes, I do.
Can you recreate it for us?
Well, the lemmings, of course, have this thing about overbreeding every now and then on some sort of a 7-year cycle or something and rushing off to commit suicide, quote unquote. And as I recall, they did stage some of that because that is the thing that happens once every 7 years and probably you don't know where.
Yet over they go, casting themselves bodily out into space.
That doesn't go beyond the line between recreation and cruelty or misrepresentation?
It's on the edge of it, yeah. There's no question about that. As I say, I think my memory of it, watching it, told me that they were doing something like that. I didn't know what, because you never see off stage what's going on, if the cameraman's smart enough. No, that doesn't surprise me enormously.
Does it concern you or bother you?
It's a shame that sort of thing has to happen. The earliest way that these things were made was people would bring in film that was already shot, and we would either buy it or not, depending on whether it fit needs or appealed to us or whatever. So it's certainly possible that a certain amount of that sort of thing was going on before we even knew it existed. Whether or not Walt ever knew that that sort of thing was happening, I really wouldn't know. He was a pretty smart fellow, and he may have made some good guesses that it could happen. We've lost a few lemmings, okay. The lemmings probably would have gotten lost anyway. That did get brought on by what could conceivably be defined as an act of cruelty.
Well, there are several.
One last word on lemmings. They don't commit suicide, and never have. In fact, Western Canadian lemmings don't even migrate. Professor Ron Brooks, a lemming expert from Guelph University in southern Ontario.
Well, the species that's found there, the collared lemming, there's never been any record of it committing suicide or jumping off cliffs. And if you're up in northern Manitoba or the eastern Arctic, there's no cliffs to jump off anyway.
This film and its impact on how we view lemmings was so bad that, in fact, later in 2003, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game had to step in, make an article, and try and correct all of the false information that came from it. The events being found out through Cruel Camera about White Wilderness and Perry put into question many of the other true life adventure series, where it was later found out that the vast majority of these documentaries had staged events within them at one point or another. There would not be many true life adventure films filmed after this. The series ended in 1960 with Jungle Cat. This, however, would not be due to any form of controversy, and instead came from changing audience tastes and the company putting more of their funding towards Disneyland and their TV shows. This would not be their only issues with animals, however. And honestly, the next story you're about to hear is even more heartbreaking. On April 8th of 1974, Disney would go on to open a new pirate-themed wildlife attraction in their Florida park, Treasure Island. A wrecked pirate ship was featured on the shore for a theme, and guests reached the island by boat. Initially, it was envisioned as a tropical hideaway with a loose pirate lore. It offered walking trails through lush flora where visitors could observe birds and other animals in a peaceful setting. This would be fairly short-lived, as Disney would end up cutting the backstory off of the island, refocusing the attraction on the zoology and the animal conservation efforts. By 1976, the pirate theme of the island would be completely removed, and the attraction would be renamed Discovery Island. In 1978, the island earned its accreditation as a zoological park by the American Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Discovery Island became known for its extensive collection of birds and its breeding conservation efforts. Notably, it housed the last known dusky seaside sparrow, an endangered bird species. Despite the efforts to save the species, the last dusky sparrow died on Discovery Island in 1987, marking the species' extinction. The island's Avian Way exhibit maintained the largest breeding colony of scarlet ibises in the US at the time. Discovery Island, for all intents and purposes, was an attraction based around wildlife, and the public seemed to enjoy it as it was just essentially a small open-air zoo. At its peak, the island was home to approximately 150 birds, as well as a variety of mammals and reptiles. It was praised for a time by many conservation groups while it was open, but in 1989, this would change drastically, as PETA would publicly accuse Disney of beating, abusing, and killing the birds on the island, restraining them within windowless and overcrowded storage units without food, water, or ventilation. All of which PETA was alerted of through multiple whistleblowers working on the island. Due to the allegations, Florida's Game and Freshwater Fish Commission and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service launched a 2-month joint inquiry. Their findings unfortunately confirmed much of what PETA had alleged, leading to 16 counts of animal cruelty against Disney and 5 employees. They stated, workers at Walt Disney World's Discovery Island fired a rifle at hawks, beat vultures to death with a stick, and destroyed the nests and eggs of egrets and ibises. They said the supervisor at the 11-acre zoological park sanctioned the alleged abuse. They were also found to have taken about 72 of these vultures and crammed them inside of a small storage unit that had no ventilation, no windows, and were neither fed nor watered, all while allegedly still being beaten. The reasoning for this is that Disney was trying to get rid of the birds considered a nuisance to people and other animals. This became a massive issue for Disney very quickly, as once all of the allegations were confirmed to be true, Disney was taken to court, along with the 5 employees. On top of this, the entire investigation was very public, and Disney was quickly losing trust with many, due to how evil the treatment of the animals were. This all coming out only a couple of years after Cruel Camera, and you can see why people lost trust with Disney. The court case for the abuse was an absolute mess. Disney refused any fault, and at first started blaming the problems on a misunderstanding about the conditions of a federal permit that allowed the company to trap and relocate 100 black vultures from the island. That didn't really go too well in their favor, as state officials pointed to the entrapment of the 72 vultures in that windowless and airless shed, only big enough for 3 vultures, along with their employees shooting the hawks and killing most of the vultures as well, considering that to be something that could not be misunderstood. Of course, animal rights activists and much of the public were completely outraged that such abuses could even occur. Disney's spokesman of the time, Charlie Ridgway, said the company was willing to pay the money and settle the case to avoid a costly, protracted court proceeding. We've always wanted to maintain the highest possible reputation at Discovery Island. We are proud of what we have accomplished in 15 years and want to continue that effort. And as part of the settlement, Disney pleaded guilty in the U.S. District Court to 1 misdemeanor charge of capturing more wild vultures than allowed by a federal permit. The prosecutors agreed to drop 15 other charges against Disney and their 5 workers, so long as they did not commit any violations against animals within the next year. Overall, Disney would end up paying $75,000 to the Florida Game and Freshwater Fish Commission, and the charges would be dropped. They just wanted to get over with it. This did so much damage to Disney's reputation during the time that they were starting to lose customers. Because of this, Disney tried to settle very quietly, distancing themselves completely. None of the Disney officials involved with the case would ever admit fault. One of my favorite quotes from this time period comes again from spokesperson Charlie Ridgway. "We don't know who can say exactly who did what or what their intentions were. All we have is what people told investigators about what happened. Since then, the case has been quietly swept under the rug with very little reporting currently up online for you to view, outside of a few archives. But it stands to me, at least, as one of the worst cases of animal abuse I've seen from any company, and I feel like the story should be talked about more. This wasn't the end of Disney's issues with animals. Over the years, they've had multiple deaths under their belt that honestly could have been avoided. One of the most prominent since Discovery Island was the Snow Buddies incident. Many of you may or may not know about this, but back in the late 2000s, Disney had a massive hand in the direct-to-DVD genre of movies, and one of their most popular was the Buddies series, a series of films based off of the original Air Bud from 1997, a movie based on a dog who could play basketball. This movie was so successful for Disney that since its release, they have made 14 of these films in total. These movies were fully live action, meaning that in order to keep these movies going for as long as they did, Disney needed a revolving door of dogs and puppies. The vast majority of these films were about a group of 5 puppies going on random adventures, used to teach kids lessons about the value of family, sticking together, and helping others wherever you can. One of these movies in particular, however, ended up with a disturbingly high death toll for the puppies involved. In 2008, the Snow Buddies movie released as the 7th series installment. The film is about the 5 puppies getting stuck on an airplane filled with ice cream and getting accidentally shipped off to Alaska, where they meet a husky puppy. They help him in a sled race and go home after learning about hard work and family. Pretty typical for a Buddies movie, but there was something different about it. This film did not carry the American Humane Association's "No animals were harmed" in its credits. During the production of the film, 30 puppies were shipped from New York to Seattle, where they would be brought to Vancouver, Canada. The very first day of filming was already a major red flag. Vancouver at the time of filming was going through a major parvo breakout. And for those of you that don't know what parvo is, it is a virus that attacks puppies and unvaccinated dogs. It's highly contagious and is fatal. When a representative of the American Humane Association showed up to review the conditions of the dogs and make sure that the film could get into the "No animals were harmed" tagline, they saw that of the 30 dogs brought, only 15 were on set, as the other 15 were showing signs of being sick. Shortly after filming began, the puppies contracted Giardia and Causadia, 2 intestinal parasites linked to the unsanitary conditions of the set itself. The 15 puppies taken from the set were being treated for these conditions for about 2 weeks, before 5 of them contracted parvo and passed away. Many of the complications the puppies were going through could have been avoided, but the set was so highly unsanitary and they neglected the parvo breakout. On top of this, the age of the puppies used on set were 6 weeks old, which broke regulations of the USDA, which requires puppies to be with their mother until at least 8 weeks of age due to their weakened immune system. The remainder of the puppies on set were quarantined after the deaths took place, after which Disney shut down the set for a while before getting new, older puppies and working under stricter conditions with both the ADA and the USDA on set. This was their 7th film within the franchise, and at this point they knew what they were doing. There's no real excuses that could be given here, and no reason these puppies should have died, outside of the fact that Disney wanted younger puppies for cuteness' sake. This film ultimately did some good though, as after this disaster, there were higher and tighter monitoring of animal use in movies, and regulations did become stricter in Hollywood. Disney is one of the biggest companies on the planet, and they unfortunately get away with a lot because of it. I have made this video a total of 4 times now, and each time a little different as my content has grown and changed over time. This video is very important to me, simply because I believe that the topic is important to not allow to be buried by Disney, as they have seemingly tried over and over again, no matter who reports on it. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch. I hope you enjoyed, and have a good night.